Welcome to the Xeneta Transportation Insight Series. Today I'm talking with Stuart Whiting, who's Senior Vice President, Logistics and Planning at Schneider Electric. Stuart's 7 years with Schneider within supply chain team, spending most of his career also with DHL, holding a number of senior positions based in Asia and in Europe. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Paul. Pleasure to join you.
I've got a couple of questions that we want to go through today, particularly around the whole supply chain disruption with the current situation. First thing that's on my mind definitely is the question around how COVID has impacted the supply chain within Schneider Electric, and even with your risk management process that I know you have in place, how have you adjusted to that and responded to the current crisis?
Right, thank you, Paul. Indeed, COVID-19 has been disruptive. It's been disruptive to many, and it's brought challenges that, despite the best intents of business continuity planning, have come to light. Now, this hit us deep in the heart. We've got operations in Wuhan itself, in China, so we were immediately impacted with plants and a distribution center that was there, and then shortly with the rest of the shutdown and extension of the Chinese festivities around the Lunar New Year in the remainder of China. Now, very quickly, the leadership in China assembled a crisis team. The crisis team was cross-functional, not just within the supply chain, but clearly our customers as well, representing the front office. We quickly put in place the automated reporting and dashboards, which allowed us to keep if you wish, a measurement of the pulse of the business and the demand that was there. But fortunately, because of the Chinese New Year festivities, the extended longer term supply chain wasn't really impacted, and neither was there any demand in the Chinese market at that time. So what it really allowed us to do was then focus on the rest of the geographies that were dependent upon China for any part of their components or what have you, that go into the production of our products and services elsewhere in the world. Now, in doing that, we were able to then look at alternative solutions in terms of procurement. Generally, our purchasing is done in a lean manner, but we do build agility in our model to cover for situations like this. And this was really learned back to the very unfortunate tsunami and effects that had on supply chains in Japan. Back in 2011, I think it was. And from there, we learned to have a dual dependency in terms of manufacturing platforms, and where possible, be not dependent on mono sourcing for particular components. Now, as we went through the crisis teams, as we went through the dashboards, and really used the true end-to-end visibility and orchestrations layers that we've built in the past 5 to 7 years, we then took this learning and drove it through in the other geographies as they became affected. So Europe, India, Philippines, North and South America, and more recently, parts of the Middle East and Africa. So, you know, for us, it hit us hard with Wuhan. I must say, I do commend the teams, our suppliers as well, who really reacted and worked with us to help us through this. Not everything's perfect, but I'd like to think we're ahead of the curve. We're able to manage customer expectations, and interestingly, it's a bit like going to war. You go to war with what you've got, not what you don't have. So we're being very careful in managing the expectations of our front office and our customers, sharing exactly what we can and cannot do, which means that we as a supply chain have to communicate extensively with our colleagues in the front office. And by and large, our customers have been very understanding. It's also helped us actually start to move some of our slow movers or parts that we were about to take out of the catalogue and replace with new products. So in some ways, it's helped us on some of that unhealthy inventory that's within the system. But overall, you know, we continue to learn day to day, and needless to say, it's been a continually dynamic situation throughout.
What do you think, you know, when you reflect on something that is so unprecedented, we've never experienced anything like this so drastic with the social distancing, working from home, etc. Yeah, how do you think now with your long-term strategy? I'm not sure what long-term definition is at Schneider, but now you're reflecting on what you've seen, how you've managed the Wuhan disruption, and long-term strategy kind of post-crisis. What's your thoughts around how that has changed for you and for Schneider?
I don't think it's changed. I mean, our long-term business planning, long-term strategic supply chain plan is a living, breathing, dynamic document that continually extends out 3 to 5 years with very clear initiatives that are undertaken in those 1 through 3 years of each initiative. We're currently in our tailored, connected and sustained initiative at the moment, which means for us that all of the initiatives we've been doing since about 2013 are starting to reap some benefits. If anything, it's accelerating our transformation, and let me give you some examples of that. It's really driving what I would call a heightened collaboration across the supply chain and with our sales and business units and our sales operations within the countries and within the regions. It's really driving home a culture of end-to-end thinking and actions within the organization. So traditional silos, particularly in the last month to 6 weeks, have been shattered. And I think it's important that in breaking those silos down, because of an unfortunate event like COVID-19, we need to be sure to embrace it and keep that spirit and culture alive post the COVID-19 challenge we've got before us. It's really emphasizing again the responsibilities within supply chain of protecting our employees, our customers, and our suppliers. So I'll talk a little bit about PPE and how we're making sure that as an essential industry, we've been able to operate the majority of our plants and distribution centers globally, but making sure that the safe distancing, all of the PPE required to operate is in place and available to our employees. That working with our customers, we equally make sure that they are protected as best as possible in terms of how we handle and deliver the products and services, and in particular in field services. We support a lot of critical infrastructure to support hospitals, utilities and so forth, nuclear power, and as such our engineers are constantly on call, and again they need to make sure they're properly equipped so as to protect themselves and the environments they're in. And in the case of our suppliers, in many instances cash flow is king as well. So where governments have shut down these operations, we've been able to get dispensation as they're part of our essential industry supply chain, but making sure they too are equipped with PPE, but also helping them from a cash flow standpoint to securing whatever materials they're needing to assist us in manufacturing operations that we fulfill. It's also strengthened our government relations. Again, getting approvals as essential industries, so being able to operate when many others have been forced to close. Working with customs to make sure we do not have PPE seized at port of entry to be used by hospitals and elsewhere. But that being said, we've collaborated with hospitals and with the local authorities to not only bring in supplies for ourselves, but also bring in supplies for those essential medical services too. And I think overall, it's just really helped us to simplify the way we work through that collaboration. That end-to-end visibility, coming together, focusing on the priorities, and then driving what's right, not just for the supply chain, but equally for our customers and for our business. So, people are learning to truly embrace data analytics, and overall I think the learning from us is that for the last 5 to 7 years what we've been doing is right. It's taken an unfortunate event like COVID-19 to prove that the dice we rolled were the right ones to roll, if you wish, and if anything we should come out stronger, leaner and meaner as a result of this unfortunate event.
You just touched on it. Just to expand on that real-time live data, you've seen obviously an improvement of that and the availability of that, how's that benefiting you in the current situation, but how do you see those kind of platforms and tools being used for the future?
Again, I think it's really driven home how well, AI, RPA, and machine learning can help us in times like this. Our culture's evolved. I mean, Paul, without mentioning our ages, we sort of grew up in a culture when we were younger where he or she with the most information wins, and now we're in a culture that he or she that shares the most information wins. So it's a question of, what data do you need, the cleanliness of that data and data objects, and then how do we aggregate it and then populate that through the ecosystem with the appropriate analytics to help us, not just in our day-to-day operations, but in our sensing and predictive capabilities for the future, which is now very, very current given the situation we see ourselves in. So the normal 13-week of sales operations and execution that you operate in within the control towers and orchestration is now being extended out and pulled forward as we recognize potential shortages or demand in the supply chain that traditionally wasn't there. Equally, we're better able to manage our customers with this data, recognizing and eradicating or mitigating any elephant orders or hockey stick behaviors in the demand chain, which could impact or create bullwhip effects within that supply chain. It's changing our customer dynamics as well, which is how do we relate and how do we communicate with our customers, and how do we share more openly the data and the capabilities we've got. But I think also from management style where, the more senior managers are now really valuing the younger generation, their agility, their technical abilities, and how they bring together what was previously quite complex algorithms or Excel spreadsheets and so on and so forth together in very short periods of time to allow us to make the right decisions. But also, in making right decisions, we're going to make wrong decisions. And we've certainly made some of those, but it's our ability to then quickly recover and then move on to the right path. So for us, I think, again, it's accelerated how important diversity is in our culture, but importantly, how AI, RPA, and machine learning can really help us manage the short term whilst equally keeping a balance for our medium to longer term ambitions as well.
So one final thing that before we wrap this up was obviously where we support you as a customer, but with your typical procurement life cycle within Schneider, is that going to change post-crisis of how you will keep an eye on the market through spot pricing, RFQs, etc.? Just would you mind just touching on what your view is as you come out of this of how you might go to market?
Yeah, of course, it's not business as usual, but what it has done again is affirm, the strategies we began to adopt 7 years ago very well, in as much as we drastically rationalized the suppliers from a transportation standpoint. When I joined Schneider, we were at about 1,500 different suppliers globally with whom we were spending 50,000 or more euros a year. We've now reduced that to about 300. And of that 300, we strategically work with 16. And those 16 then manage the other 284 that support our needs. So the strategic partnership we've formed with these 16 companies has really come to bear in the times we face today. Now, those contracts traditionally are 3 to 5 years long. It requires investment on the supplier part as well as ours, particularly in systems and tools, as well as competencies and capabilities. But equally, how we integrate not just from a data and systems and tools perspective, but by the mere fact that we have these individuals embedded in our 7 control towers that are around the world to help us better respond and be more agile in how we manage not just the supply chain, but the demands of our customer needs. The remaining suppliers that are in there, that's the 284 and the long tail that have a spend below that €50,000 threshold I referred to earlier, is really then managed in a transactional and tactical way. Those, regardless of mode, activities are managed through the traditional quarterly or annual RFQ, RFI processes. But it's very clear that right now, anything in the airspace or express space is essentially going to be on hold for at least 6 months, maybe even a year. And in ocean freight, again, we're going to keep a very close eye on that. We've already started to see force majeure being implemented by some, while others have not yet. But again, it's very dynamic. So for now, most of our strategic and tactical procurement needs were taken care of in Q4 and Q1 of this year up till February. So I think we should be good for about a year. And right now, in terms of how we would then go back out to market, then we would continue to triangulate our data using our ERPs, TMS, and FAP, which we've broadly got freight audit payment, which is broadly deployed globally. But important, whilst we're triangulating against those three sources of data, that we would probably still continue to benchmark with third parties. So, companies such as yourself and others would then just make sure that, what we're sensing, what we're feeling is right. And more importantly, that we haven't got anything wrong within our procurement cycles. In the short term, though, in managing, particularly in places like air, where we're in very high demand and in spot rate environments, particularly in the Asia Pacific and transatlantic routes, then there is what I would call an ad hoc need that needs to be embedded in our processes. And that's, again, reaching out just for an opinion or observation to the third parties that normally would assist in our day-to-day benchmarking requirements. So I hope that answers the question for you, Paul.
It does, man. It does. I could talk for hours. You know that. Well, you and I can talk for hours with each other anyway. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. So, Stuart, I really appreciate you spending 15, 20 minutes just to give us an update of where you are. So, thanks again, and it's great to catch up with you.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and best of luck. And everybody, take care, be safe, and look after your family and loved ones.
Thanks, Stuart. So, to everybody that reads and reviews our transportation series, you can find everything on our Xeneta customer discussion forum on community.xeneta.com. So all of our recordings are hosted there. So again, thanks, Stuart, and we'll catch up soon.
All the best. Cheers now.